Situation normal. Everything must change. My name is Simon Wardley. I've worked in the open source and the agile world for a considerable amount of time. You started off with some inspirational statements, so I'd like to start off with a warning. I'm a scientist by training. I also happen to like kitten pictures, which means I like data and graphs. And I've done a quick graph. This is the level of audience pain, that's you, against the number of slides given in a roughly 50-minute presentation. And I reckon there's a safe limit of about 90. Now, I like to experiment, so I'll be using no less than 182. The second piece of warning is I'm going to talk about strategy. Scream horror. I'm going to try and avoid doing things like Uberize your agile ecosystem or whatever is popular terms in the HBR today. I'm going to talk about it from my own personal experience. So I used to run an online photo service many years ago. It was in Old Street. We were the only tech company in Old Street. This was in 2002. We'd gone all agile, we were using open source, we had wonderful vision statements, our strategy customer focused, we will lead an innovative effort in the market through our use of agile techniques and open source, all wonderful stuff. But it had a real problem, this company. We had loads of revenue, we were very profitable, but the problem was me. I didn't know what I was doing. I was the CEO of the company, and I hadn't got a clue. I wasn't like this chess-playing master. I was like the alchemist. It was all gut feel. It was all magic frameworks. It was all copying everybody else. And I started going around recording other CEOs talking about strategy, and I do this every couple of years. And I record the words they say, what I like to call business-level abstractions of a healthy strategy, or BLAs for short. Here are the common BLAs. Most recently I did this. Digital business, big data, disruptive, innovative, collaborative, competitive advantage, ecosystem, blah, blah, blah. And then what I do is I create a BLA template by combining people's strategies together. Something like this. Our strategy is BLA. We will lead a BLA effort of the market through our use of BLA and BLA to build a BLA. And then I would combine the BLAs and the BLA templates and randomly auto-generate strategies for myself. So I thought I'd go through these. This is number one. This is all random gibberish. Our strategy is customer-focused. We will lead a disruptive effort of the market through our use of innovative social media and big data to build a collaborative cloud-based ecosystem. Number two, our strategy is innovative digital business. We will lead a growth effort of the market through our use of customer-focused competitive advantage. And, oh, you can barely say the words. But I'd send these out to people. And recently, a couple of years ago, I sent to about 400 people, got 3 basic responses. The first one is, this is more or less the exact wording from our business plan. The second one was, I've seen 2 of these used already. And my favorite is, are you for hire? So a friend of mine's put this all online, by the way. This is strategy as a service. So if you ever need a strategy, just type in the URL. It will automatically create you one based upon nothing whatsoever. I did this a couple of days ago. And if you don't like it, it's really simple. Just press refresh. I mean, it saves a bucket load in consultants. So anyway, back in 2005, I sort of come to the impression I didn't know what I was doing. And maybe I wasn't the only one. So I went back and started to look in history, and I looked at Sun Tzu. Anybody know what Sun Tzu wrote? Art of War. Wonderful. So Sun Tzu talked about 5 factors that mattered in competition. 1, understand your purpose, your moral imperative. 2, understand the landscape, the environment you're competing in. 3, understand the climatic patterns, the things that change the environment. Then you need to understand doctrine, the ways of organizing yourself. And finally, you're into leadership and context-specific gameplay. I thought, wow, That's fascinating. And then I came across this chap, John Boyd, US Air Force pilot. Anybody heard of him? UDA. Fantastic. So you have the game, the purpose. The first thing you need to do is observe the environment. So that's what landscape and climatic patterns are about. Then you orientate yourself around it with doctrine. And then you're into decision, the whole context-specific play, and acting. I thought, great. But I'd show this to other people, and they say, no, it doesn't matter. It's all about why. And that's really interesting, because there's two whys. There's the why of purpose, and that is different from the why of movement. So if you think a game like chess, you've got the why of purpose maybe to win the game, and the why of movement is why do you move this piece over that piece? And that's totally different. And as a result of moving, you actually learn what is successful. So I went back, looked at my company for Tango. There we are, several million users, 16 lines of business, very profitable. And I thought, right, we have a purpose. We sort of understand what we're about. Actually, it was a pretty lousy purpose. It was a mishmash of other things. But I started asking, how do we observe the landscape? And this brought me into a subject known as situational awareness. And to explain it, I'm going to use three stories: Vikings, chess, and Themistocles. So the Vikings, very frightening people. This is how they used to navigate. From Herman, head due west towards Half, and you will have sailed north of Hatland, so that they use stories, epic stories. You'd spend 10 years learning epic stories before they'd let you be in charge of the boat. Now, all that means is that it's much simpler with a map. Now, we do this ourselves. If somebody asks us directions to a place, if they have a map, we just point it out. If they don't, we give them a story, like up the road, turn left, at the roundabout, go right, and then left. And then you drive off, and you're left with that moment. Oh dear, yes. So anyway, what would you use to navigate? Visual map, verbal story. What would you use? Right, what do we use in business? Stories. Excellent, super. Right, so another example is Chess World. I want you to imagine you live in a world where everybody plays chess, but no one's ever seen the board. You press a piece, your competitor sees what you've pressed, they counter, you counter, they counter, and the game goes on for ages until somebody wins or it's a draw. Now, what will happen is we will take these sequences and put them into our big data systems and come up with magic secrets of success. So if you press bishop, I should respond with queen, knight, and rook. And we'll probably write articles like the secret of the queen or the secret of the bishop on this stuff. If you don't believe me, take a look at HBR, Harvard Business Review, how earlobes can signify leadership potential. I mean, this is phrenology of management. Now, one day, you're going to play a game of chess against somebody, a novice, and they will see something magical. They will see the board. And you will move, and they will counter, and you will move, and they will counter, and you will have lost. And you'll be sitting there going, what the fiddlesticks happened there? The first thing you're going to do is write down this sequence, like it's a magic secret of success, and it's not going to work. Then you're going to go, maybe it's the speed at which they press the button, like the lecturer. Or you'll start thinking maybe it's cultural. Maybe they're a happy sort of person. The reality is you exist in a low-level situational awareness environment. They exist in a high. You're going to lose all the time. So, what would you use to learn? Secrets of success or context-specific play? Brilliant. What do you use in business? Sorry? Secrets of success. All right, the last one is Themistocles. Ancient politician, Greek general, had a problem. The Persians were invading. So what he decided to do was to block off the Straits of Artemisium, force the Persians, there were about 170,000 of them, along a narrow pass into Thermopylae, where a small number of troops could defend against a large force. There was about 3,000 Greeks, including 300. Fantastic, you know the story. All right, I want you to imagine you're a member of the Athenian army. You're standing there, it's the eve of battle. Themistocles is giving you purpose. We're going to defend against the invading horde of the Persians. But then he says to you, I do not understand the landscape. I do not understand the environment. I have no map, but have no fear. For I have created a SWOT diagram. Strengths, a well-trained Spartan army, a high level of motivation not to become a Persian slave. Weaknesses, the E4s might stop the Spartans turning up. A truckload of Persians are turning up. Opportunities, get rid of the Persians, get rid of the Spartans. We're Athenian, we actually hate the Spartans. Threats, the Persians get rid of us. And the Oracle says a really dodgy film might be produced in a few thousand years. So, what do you think is more effective in terms of communication and determining strategy in battle? Position and movement described by a map, or a magic framework like a SWOT? SWOT, there is always somebody. Right. Well, what do we use in business? SWOT, yes. Right, so if I go back to chess and alchemy, if you look at navigation, learning, and strategy, chess is all about, it's visual, it's context-specific learning. It's all about position and movement. It's what we call a high-level situational awareness environment. It's a bit like the military. If you ask a general, why did you bomb the hill? They won't say, because 67% of other generals are bombing hills. They won't say, because I read an article in General Weekly that bombing hills is the new thing. They won't tell you because it made a good story, or that that's what Uber would do. It's all about position and movement. It's all about multiple wares and why we attack that space over another. Now, alchemy is all about storytelling, secrets of success, and magic frameworks. It's what we call a low-level situational awareness environment. And there I was as the fake CEO. I thought I was the only one in the world, and I was sitting over in that environment. And the problem is, I had no maps. Now, maps are very specific things. They have a particular set of characteristics. They are visual. They are context-specific. It's the battle at hand. They have an anchor, like a compass. They have position of pieces, like this is north, south, east, or west of that. And you have the movement, and there's consistency in the movement. Same with the chessboard. Exactly the same characteristics. The anchor is the board itself. This is position B1, that is B2. There is consistency of movement. Same with a tube map. Context specific. This is London, it's not Paris. You've got an anchor, which is the tube network. You've got the position of pieces. And if you go, say, from South Kensington to Victoria, you're going to go through Sloane Square. It's not going to be one day that suddenly Mornington Crescent appears in between the stations. Now, people would say, but we have maps in business. Really? So I used to have things like system maps. Anybody seen one of these before? Yes? Well, it's great, except for it's not a map. It has no navigational characteristics to it at all. I used to have lots of these business process maps. Seen one of these? Fabulous. Again, it's not a map. Doesn't have position, doesn't have movement. I used to see lots of these digital maps. Have you seen these? Yeah, brilliant. Again, not maps. These ones aren't even context specific. According to this, if I want to go from online retailer to mobile app and content service manager, I have to go through the station of review and recs, whatever that is, advocacy marketing, social comment. It's just gibberish. I used to have things like this. Seen one of these? Yes, it's not a map either. So it's almost like inconceivable, I used to say to myself. It's like they're using that word, but they don't know what it really means. So how to create a map of business? This was my problem in 2005. So I sat down and had a cup of tea. And while I was having a cup of tea, I thought, I'm a user who needs a cup of tea. But a cup of tea has needs. It needs tea, it needs hot water, it needs a mug. And hot water has needs. It needs a kettle, it needs cold water. And a kettle has needs, it needs power. So what I've now got is an anchor, the user, and I've got position relative to the anchor. So I took one of my network topology diagrams, reorganized it around the customer, added a value chain, and that gave me position. So I got a chain of needs. But still, it's useless as a map because it doesn't have movement. So I looked at something like power. Starts off with the Parthian battery 400 AD. Somehow, we end up with utility provision of electricity, 1886, Tesla and Westinghouse. Now, that process of evolution or change is movement. And it turns out there's a common pattern for how things evolve. You start off, if you look at ubiquity and certainty, something is rare and poorly understood. Then you get custom-built examples. It's becoming more widespread, more well-defined. You get products, eventually rental services, then commodity, and then eventually utility services. So I can take my value chain, flatten my evolution axis at the bottom, create a map. I thought, wow. And everybody else went, so what? Well, the point about a map is once you have a map of the environment, you can start to learn or observe climatic patterns. So the first thing you observe, and these are the rules that influence the game, is that everything evolves in your map through supply and demand competition. The second thing, as things evolve, their characteristics change. They go from this uncharted space of being chaotic, uncertain, unpredictable, through a transitional space until they become industrialized, ordered, standard, stable, boring, dull. It doesn't matter whether it's money, penicillin, or computing. You then start to learn, because the characteristics change, there is no such thing as one-size-fits-all methods. Agile's strong here, it is weak over here compared to Six Sigma, and both of them are weak in the middle compared to something like Lean. Over here, we're reducing cost of change, i.e. change is the norm. Here, we're about reducing waste. Over here, we're about reducing deviation. So you start to learn there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all pattern. Then you start to learn that we have inertia to change because of past success. Blockbuster, Netflix, who was first with a website? Great. Who was first with video ordering online? Great. Who was first with experimenting with video streaming online? Excellent. Who went bankrupt first? Yay! It wasn't a lack of innovation that did them in. It was inertia caused by a pre-existing business model. Anybody know what the model was? Late fees. You know, it was all those those of us who remember video cassettes. Okay, that's where they made their money. Now, there's 27 common economic patterns, and once you know them, you can start to anticipate change. So there I was in 2005. There's my value chain. There's my map of one of my lines of business. I know platform compute's going to a utility. I know we're going to have inertia. I know it's going to cause an explosion of higher order systems. And that helps me because I can now identify where I should invest. Now, once you have a purpose and you understand your landscape and you're starting to understand climatic patterns, so I'm now anticipating, then we can get on to doctrine. And what is doctrine? Doctrine is the universally applicable principles regardless of context. So it's a bit like in the military, flanking versus firing. Flanking is context specific. You flank an opponent who is at a particular position. Firing is generally a useful thing to know how to do. So before flanking opponents, you don't want to be going, let's flank, right, we better go off and learn how to fire rifles and tanks then. You want to have done the tank and rifle bit beforehand. So there are certain patterns which are universally useful and some which are context specific. So the universally useful ones are, surprise, focus on user needs. Turns out it's a really useful thing to do. Another one is removing bias and duplication. If you have a map, so for example, immigration, border control, police, we share maps, you suddenly discover we're building the same thing. Now, everybody thinks government is bad at duplication and bias. The worst example in government I found is 118 workflow systems doing exactly the same thing. So we've rebuilt the wheel 118 times. Now, the private sector has us hands down. I have a global pharma company, has 300 teams building enterprise content management systems, including 5 global efforts to build the global enterprise content management system, none of which were aware of the other's existence. I have a bank who has approximately 1,000 risk management systems. They're sitting there going, we can't innovate. I'm saying, look, you've rebuilt the wheel 1,000 times, all in different shades of blue. That's pretty amazing. So, once you get rid of the bias and duplication, then you start to learn we need multiple methods, so we're going to use outsource over here, off-the-shelf products here, probably build in-house agile techniques here, and of course this stuff is going to evolve. So something like HS2, high-speed rail, there we are, trying to organize it in this way, turn it into a map, suddenly we can apply multiple methods. That's back in 2011-12. So to give you an example of this, do you know what a world perception server is? No? It's part of a self-driving car. All right, I'm going to pretend you're all from finance. You may be from finance, I don't know. But I will pretend you're all from finance and that everything in IT is Elvish to you. So I'm going to take a network topology diagram, not a map, network topology, and translate it into Elvish. And now I'm going to ask you a question. Should we outsource or build our own? Should we outsource or build our own? What do you think? Build your own? Okay, so I'm going to take exactly the same diagram. I'm going to convert it into a map and ask you the same questions again. So there's no other information other than the fact that I've turned it into a map. Should we outsource or build our own? Should we outsource or build our own? Right, now you convert it back to English and it's easy. So going back to Fatango, there we are. We have our map. We're applying multiple different methods. The next thing we learned around about 2006 was to break things into small components. We got this from FIST. Anybody heard of FIST? Fast, Inexpensive, Simple and Tiny, US Air Force. It's a program. They used it for building the Harvest Hawk. That's a Marine combat aircraft, which went from idea to combat operations in about 18 months, which for military hardware is incredibly fast. So it turns out it's a really good idea to break things down into small components rather than trying to build it as one whole thing, and also actually to organize yourself in that way. So Amazon, I think, calls it 2 pizzas. Other people have other terms for cell-based structures. So most organizations don't do this. They treat it as one thing. And so what happens? They outsource it all. That stuff over on the right-hand side gets efficiently treated. They get killed over here because it's constantly changing, and so they get hammered by change control cost. Then they get into a fight with the vendor, and the vendor says it's all their fault because they didn't know what they wanted, and therefore next time they should specify it better. It's just a scam, basically. Break it down into components, those problems go away. And then what you discover is you don't have one culture in an organization. You have multiple. The types of people you need to manage this environment are different from the middle, different from the left. So we started organizing ourselves in what's known as a pioneer settler town planner structure. It's an adaptive structure which copes with constant change. So the pioneers were very good at building this radically wonderful stuff and operating it, but it was flaky. And the settlers then would steal it from them. The settlers would do the stealing, not the pioneers say, I'm bored. Here, have this. Settlers would steal and turn it into useful products or throw it away. And they used to run and build and operate those products. And the town planners would steal from the settlers and industrialize that to component services. GCHQ very kindly has open sourced an entire document called Boiling Frogs, which talks about that 3-party structure, how to organize in that way. So if you get a chance, well worth reading. So, I have my purpose. I sort of understand the landscape. I'm starting to understand the climatic patterns. I can anticipate change. It's about 27 of those patterns. I'm now orientating myself around the space. There's about 40 different forms of doctrine. And now I get into the leadership bit. So this is the context-specific form of gameplay. So rather than, this is the bit about flanking. How am I going to manipulate this market to my favor? So I have my map, I anticipate, I know where I want to invest. So it's how I also know where I want to leave, the stuff I don't want to do. Now, how do I start manipulating that to my advantage? So things like open source are great for industrializing. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt is brilliant for slowing things down. Oh, you don't want to use that cloud, all that sort of stuff. There's constraints. There's about 70 different patterns. It's great fun. And so you come up with a context-specific form of gameplay. So this is the first play we did in it was the end of 2005. We realized compute was going to a utility. I thought it was going to be Google. I didn't realize it was a friend of mine, Ben Black, and Chris Pinkham building it in South Africa with Amazon. So we decided to build the world's first ever platform as a service. Now, that was a serverless environment. It was JavaScript, front and back end. You build entire applications, single language. It had functional billing. And the intention was people would rapidly build on top of that. There was a particular ecosystem model that we could exploit. We were going to use an open play approach. And that was the basic play. And so we acted, and that's what we did. We built Zimkey, world's first ever serverless environment, up the road, and it grew like hotcakes. It was fantastic. Brilliant. Unfortunately, parent company got some strategy consultants in, and they said the three things that we were doing, mobile phones as cameras, 3D printing, and cloud computing, were not the future. The future was, in fact, 3D television. So we shut all that down. Well, I actually left. By the way, anybody have a 3D TV here? Anybody? Oh, right, sorry. Anybody use a 3D TV here? Really? One? I think you're the first person I've ever... Oh, you watched it once. That was several years ago. Right. Anybody use cloud? Anybody use the mobile phone as a camera? 3D printing? Yeah, okay, fine. So then I went to a company called Ubuntu. Anybody heard of Ubuntu? Yay! So we mapped out the environment. This was 2008. Learned out where to attack and all the rest of it. We were 2-3% of the operating system market. We were tiny. We were up against Microsoft and Red Hat. We had several hundred people. But we mapped it out, used that to target about 500,000. There we are, 70% of cloud by 2010. After that, I started working with government, wrote something called the Better for Less paper for the coalition before they got into power. This was all about transformation within government IT. These days, I do this stuff, whether it's mergers and acquisitions or even nation-state competition. But most people go, gosh, this is all terribly, terribly complex. And the answer is, yes, it is, I'm afraid. If you look at this, which do I want to use, a map or a SWOT diagram? We all laugh because we're familiar with geographical maps. But to be honest, that's simple. That's more complex. It's the same with, secrets of success. Rather than context-specific play, it's way, oh, please just tell me the top 10 secrets of success or tips of successful people. That's so much easier. And it's the same with storytelling and navigation. I mean, the Vikings weren't stupid for using stories. It's what they were familiar with. Of course, you wouldn't today try to organize navigation with stories, but you did back then. So quick summary. Strategy turned out to be a cycle. It wasn't a nice linear sort of path. It was a loop. And as you changed and as you acted, it was important to understand your purpose, the landscape, the environment, the climate. From that, you can anticipate. Then doctrine, how you organize yourself. Then context-specific play. And then you manipulate the environment. And as you do so, your purpose might change. You start off with Nokia, the paper mill, become a plastics manufacturer, become a telecommunications company. I'm not quite sure what it's become today, but it is something different. So you have the why of purpose and the why of movement, and it's a constant cycle. It's iterative. It's really important to act. That's how you learn, going through that cycle and having a systematic mechanism of learning, which is also why you need to observe the landscape. So, that's me. Thank you. Not quite. So, that was 182 slides. It didn't seem like it, did it? So now we go into the danger zone. So there's 4 subjects to talk about: serverless, weak signals, ecosystem, and Brexit. So we'll get to serverless to begin with. So I'll use mapping to explain serverless. First of all, let's start with cloud, compute. 1943, Genesis, the Z3. Custom-built systems like Leo, Lions Electronic Office, IBM 650, it's in the product rental stage. So we had applications which were built with emerging architectural practice based upon products. Now, those products servers had what's known as a high MTTR, mean time to recovery. So if your server went bang, it would take you weeks to get a new one. So we built practices like scale up, bigger machines, capacity planning, M+1. Anybody remember M+1? Disaster recovery tests, remember that? Right, that spread, evolved, and became best practice. And then what happened? Well, what actually happened, we used to go around laughing at people who hadn't done capacity planning. Oh, you silly what's it? Anyway, so then what happened is compute went from product to utility. Now a new emerging set of practices appeared based upon a low MTTR. So rather than weeks to get a machine, it took seconds. So we started to not scale up, but scale out, distributed systems, design for failure, chaos engines, all that sort of stuff. And this is a pattern known as coevolution. It's one of the 27. So it's happened in finance, it's happened in engineering, mechanical engineering, it happened in compute. So when we talk about legacy, what we mean is applications built with best architectural practice for a product world. And when we talk about DevOps, we mean applications built with good architectural practice for a utility world. That's it. Of course, you go along, and in the early days, people would go, I make my legacy cloudy. Anybody remember that? Yeah? Stick my legacy on Amazon. Amazon has an outage. They run around going, the end of cloud is nigh. To which you go, shouldn't our architecture evolve as well? And it's burn him, heretic, and all that sort of stuff. Anybody remember? Yeah? Okay, this is because we had inertia created by past practice to that change. Which is why vendors ran around saying what you need is an enterprise cloud. Rolling the enterprise cloud. Scotty, I want an enterprise cloud, all the benefits of volume operations, commodity components built with non-commodity hardware, customized to my needs. Yeah, can I change the laws of physics? Commodity does not equal non-commodity. Volume operations does not equal customization. Still, that didn't stop people spending billions. If we go up the stack a bit more, same thing's going on with platform. So platform is very much in the product space, so you have like stacks like LAMP stack, .NET stack, whatever it happens to be, and we'd have coding architectural practices. Now, that is now shifting to more of a utility. And so we're getting an emerging set of architectural practices based around, functional billing, entire new ways of operating, entire new ways of monitoring, etc. And so if you're investing, you invest in like the serverless space, the Lambdas of this world, or Google Functions or Azure Functions, and you're also discovering what those new practices are. Of course, that's what you do if you're sensible. And of course, adoption over time, that's where the rest of the world goes. Of course, enterprise IT doesn't. Enterprise follows a different path. It goes through different stages, the ignore stage, the no, I said no, damn it stage, and then the oh no and oh fiddlesticks stage when it realizes it's got no choice and has to catch up. And it does so because the bits that you should leave, which is the legacy architectural coding practices and legacy practices based upon product, create inertia. But they're also building an entire new form of inertia right at this very moment. It's marvelous. It's called DevOps. So you hear these people going, we're going into infrastructure as a service, and we're going to do DevOps. Well, first of all, it's going to take you 5 or 7 years. That's how long it took Netflix to get rid of its legacy to get into that space. And of course, by the time that you suddenly have that big party, we've built our DevOps team, we've all gone DevOps and into cloud, everybody else has gone into platform. So what you're doing will be building the new legacy. I mean, you need to focus over there now. DevOps was great, but you should have been doing that years ago. Of course, if you go around telling people that, because all of these groups have inertia, and you go around saying, DevOps is the new legacy, you get all the normal response, burn him, heretic, all that sort of stuff. It's no different from what it was before. I mean, they'll give you all the same reasons as we had with, shift to infrastructure as a service. It's not secure, it's not reliable, and all that sort of stuff. You'll just hear the same patterns that you've heard before. So thank you very much. You've been wonderful.